Welcome back to the Chokehold Hour. We're in the studio to discuss UFC Denver. Thug Rose had a good performance, did what she was supposed to do, beat Tracy Cortez, someone who really was never on her level, hasn't fought the competition nearly high enough that she should have heading into a fight with a championship-level fighter like Thug Rose. But we already discussed that. That's a conversation topic for another day. Today, we're talking prospects, and we're talking prospects that suffered career setbacks in Denver this past Saturday. The first prospect we're touching on, Josh Van. Listen, I am still super high on this kid. I think Josh Van is a talented fighter. He is very good. His boxing combinations, still definitely above average within the UFC. His ability to open up and extend when he throws combinations, it's great to watch. I mean, if you look at the second round of his fight with Charles Johnson, Josh Van was on, his gas tank was spot on. He was on the pressure the whole round. He was throwing punch after punch after punch. Like I said in the preview to UFC Denver, Josh Van, he's a flowy fighter. When he throws his combinations, it's not like he's just punching 1, 2, even 3 times and stopping. There's a 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th punch, and so on. However many punches he throws enough to disrupt his opponent's rhythm. And that's what was happening for the entirety of the second round. All 5 minutes, Josh Van was on the pressure, moving forward, kept Charles Johnson up against the cage as he needed to do with the bigger fighter, and was extending, throwing long, lengthy, time-consuming combinations that did damage, but not enough damage. Guys, there's not a lot of flyweights who are 5 feet 9 inches tall. That's a pretty ridiculous physique to have at the flyweight weight class, and Charles Johnson has it. He's a great striker, has a Muay Thai background. He was really the kryptonite matchup for Josh Van. I mean, giving a young prospect so early in his career, a dude who's literally stylistically built to beat him, yet doesn't have a lot of name recognition, I think that was actually a mistake on the UFC's end. I mean, Tyra would have been a better fight because Tyra's a smaller fighter than Charles Johnson. Granted, I don't think Josh Van was ready for that step up in competition just yet either. But I'm just saying, guys, Charles Johnson is no joke. This dude just took another prospect 0-2 now in 2024, and Josh Van just fell victim to a poorly matched fight. It was, in terms of sports, a mismatch. I mean, the 4 or 5 inch height difference makes a huge difference in the fight, for lack of a better word. I mean, listen, Josh Van still looked good, but because he was so undersized, regardless of how many combinations he threw and how long they were, how he was able to string together punch after punch after punch, he simply wasn't able to hurt Charles Johnson of significance at any point in that fight because of the size difference. Charles Johnson took those hits in stride, and he came out guns a-blazing in the third round, did what he needed to do, and all he needed was one, quite literally. He hit Josh Van with that hook, ended up following up with the uppercut. Down goes Josh Van, just like that. The fight's over because of that significant size difference. Josh Van just wasn't able to hurt Charles Johnson, and on the flip side, Charles Johnson's strikes did a significant more amount of damage to Josh Van compared to when Josh Van is hitting Charles Johnson. It just really sucks that he drew a matchup that was literally, he drew a fighter that was catered to beat him. A guy who has a striking background, very tall, very lengthy, can pick you apart from the outside and brawl on the inside. Josh Van, even when he understood the range and got in the pocket, Charles Johnson hung with him, and it just was it proved to be a tough fight. I mean, obviously it was a tough fight for Josh Van. He got put to sleep, but I don't mean it was a tough fight physically. I mean stylistically, and Charles Johnson is a stud. The only thing next for him would have to be a step up in competition. Whereas for Josh Van, I think it's time to take a step back. Let's just rewind, turn back the clock a little bit, give him a guy who is good, has a little bit of notoriety, brings a name to the table. He's not a star, but people know who he is, and he's not oversized. Actually, he's relatively undersized, and he doesn't have any skill sets that jump out at you glaringly like, oh my God, this guy's a freaking stud. Great boxer, great grappler. No, he's just all heart, all gas, no brakes, CJ Vergara, guys. I think Josh Van and CJ would be a great fight. Why? CJ, like I said, is not too big for Josh Van, so Josh can handle that undersizedness. I mean, he wouldn't actually be that small in the octagon compared to CJ, whereas against Charles Johnson, he was literally a midget, dude. I mean, it was significant. You could see the size difference every second of that fight. CJ Vergara is miniature, as is Josh Van. I mean, they'd both mess me up, don't get me wrong. But it makes it, when two trained fighters engage in physical combat, the bigger one does have an advantage. And CJ Vergara, like I said, none of his skill sets jump off the table at you. None of them are like, oh, wow, this dude is that good. He has proven that he can fight and stand in the pocket, take shots in return, but that's really all he's proven in his UFC career so far. Josh Van hasn't proven much either, but what he has proven is that his boxing and boxing combinations are elite, and I think those combinations would prove to be too much for CJ Vergara, and yeah, Josh Van would end up knocking him out at one point or another in that fight. But give me Josh Van, CJ Vergara. That's the fight I want to see next for Josh, because I think it's a bounce back fight for him. It's a fight he can win. Not a lot of pressure, not too many eyes on it, but just enough to say or see that fight and say, okay, Josh Van, this kid is still special. He just had a setback against a guy who was tailor-made to beat him in Charles Johnson. Moving on, we got another prospect who took a little setback and step back in his career at UFC Denver. Christian Rodriguez lost to Julian Erosa, and I'm going to go out on a limb and just say this, guys. Christian Rodriguez got fraud checked. It's plain as day. There's no other way to put it. Julian Erosa is a good fighter. Don't get me wrong. The dude, he's got quality wins. He beat Nate the Train. He beat Sean Woodson. He beat Mean Hakeem. He beat Charles Jourdain. But then again, this is the same dude who got head kicked into oblivion by Alex Caceres. Julian Erosa is a gatekeeper's gatekeeper. He prevents you from fighting the dudes who are the holders of the key to the top of the division. Christian Rodriguez, guys, he doesn't have any. He's like CJ Vergara. He's done good in his career, but he doesn't have any skill sets that jump out to me significantly. I mean, his two biggest wins, Raul Rosas Jr. Rosas was a freaking child. He was 18 years old. He was not ready for the physical contest that he ended up engaging in on that night, and Christian Rodriguez took advantage of a boy as a man in the octagon. He then went on to beat another prospect in Cameron Simon. Listen, Simon's good enough, but that win aged like milk, dude. I mean, Simon ended up getting pieced up by Peyton Talbot. Talbot just mopped the floor with Cameron Simon, made it look worse than Christian Rodriguez did. It wasn't even close. Cameron Simon has gotten worse increasingly since the Christian Rodriguez fight, and I don't think there is anything about Christian Rodriguez that is like, oh, wow. He doesn't have the it factor. He doesn't have the wow factor. I'm not saying he's bad. I'm not saying his career is over. I am saying the next step for Christian Rodriguez, I'm not giving you a fight. I'm telling him to go back to the gym, look at the drawing board, see what he did wrong, and really just see what he can improve upon, because he has two wins that have, I mean, one of them, like I said, aged like milk. The other was against an 18-year-old. That's just ridiculous. An 18-year-old should never be fighting in the UFC. Now, Raul Rosas is a little bit bigger now, a little bit stronger. I think if you run that back, Rosas finishes Christian Rodriguez. It was just on that night. Raul Rosas he wasn't a fully developed man yet, and he still might not be, but he's much closer than what he was when he fought Christian Rodriguez. So yeah, Christian Rodriguez, guys, he got fraud checked. Go back to the drawing board, figure some things out. I think he needs to I don't know what he has to get better at, but it has to be something. You either need to be pretty freaking good at everything, like a DDP, if you want to make it far in this sport, or you have to be a specialist. You have to excel at something, like Poatan, like Israel Adesanya, Khabib even, excels in the wrestling department. You have to have something that's better than what other people have. You can't bring all-around averageness to the table and expect to beat even guys like Julian Erosa. Listen, I said it, but Julian Erosa beat Mean Hakeem and Charles Jourdain. He's still a gatekeeper's gatekeeper, but that doesn't mean he's a bad fighter. If you want to beat even the average level competition in the Ultimate Fighting Championship, the highest level of martial arts in the world, You have to be good at something or pretty good at everything, and Christian Rodriguez is neither of those things. From what I've seen, after that Julian Erosa fight, he is average at everything. Erosa looked very comfortable on the feet and then went to the ground and submitted him. So he was just better in terms of every facet of the game. Christian Rodriguez equals fraud check. That's that. Still a good fighter. I'm praying for his success. I hope he does good things in life because I would never, ever wish negativity upon another. I'm a positive person. I think Christian Rodriguez, there's positivity to be seen within his game. He has good wins. He doesn't have great ones. He has fine skill sets. He doesn't have outstanding ones. And what he needs to do, head back to the gym and hone in on a specific discipline. Otherwise, I don't see his career progressing much further than it already has. And he could become a guy who, oh yeah, I beat Raul Rosas Jr. way back when, and now look at him. Raul Rosas is flourishing in this sport. Yeah, it's like Christian Rodriguez becomes Alex Pereira sitting in a bar saying, oh, I beat that guy, except there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Poatan went on to become one of the greatest stars in the sport ever and is now a 2-division champion. I don't see that happening for Christian Rodriguez. He needs to go back to the gym. He needs to figure some things out because right now he is not at a sustainable level to keep advancing within the rankings in a promotion as high level and as competitive as the UFC. So that'll do it for today's episode. As John Anik always says when he's calling those fights, that'll do it. 2 prospects down and out. Setbacks suffered at UFC Denver. Oh my goodness, it's true, guys. Josh Van, Christian Rodriguez, both were pushed back in terms of career growth and progress, but there's room to grow for them. Josh Van specifically because he has that unique skill set in his boxing. Christian Rodriguez needs to find his unique skill set, but either way, both of them need to improve in order to progress in the UFC.